When we design digital courses, especially for something like sustainability, we're not just hoping people learn a few new facts. We want to see real change, right? Change is how people think, change in what they do, and change in the very system they work in. So the big question is, how do we build courses that actually do something? Today, we're going to dive into a major paradigm shift that can turn our courses from simple content dumps into powerful engines for real-world transformation. All right, so here's the game plan. We'll start by looking at a super common pitfall I call the content first trap. Then we'll introduce a much more powerful way of thinking, designing backwards. From there, we'll explore how learning is always part of a bigger system, how tension inside that system can actually be a good thing. Finally, we'll pull it all together with a really exciting idea of digital learning laboratories. So let's kick things off with something that's probably going to feel super familiar to a lot of you when we sit down to create a new digital course. The process we follow is often very predictable and honestly pretty limited. It usually goes like this. First, we decide what content we want to teach. Then we get busy building all the stuff, the slides, the videos, the readings, and finally we test the learners to see if they remember it all. See the pattern? This entire process is laser focused on one thing, transmitting information. It's not designed for transformation, and that right there is the trap. So how do we get out of the trap? Well, it takes a fundamental shift in our thinking. It all starts by asking a completely different question, right at the very beginning of the whole process. The whole pivot is moving from content to outcomes. So instead of starting with what should we teach, we flip it on its head and ask, what change will this learning actually enable? This is the heart of a framework called theory of change. It forces us to get crystal clear on the end goal first, and only then do we work backwards to figure out what kind of learning will get people there. So designing backwards means we start asking these kinds of really practical questions on the ground. We're not just thinking about knowledge anymore. We're thinking about application. Will a teacher actually change how they run their classroom? If a farmer really is going to adapt to their practices when they start with these questions, the course stops being just a training module or becomes a key piece of much larger change initiative. Now, this is a huge step, but to really design for change, we have to grasp one more critical truth about learning. It doesn't happen in a neat little box. It happens inside messy, complex systems of activity. This quote says it all, doesn't it? And this is where the brilliant work of a scholar named Ingerstrom becomes so incredibly helpful. He helps us to see that learning isn't just about one person downloading information into their brain. It's deeply woven into a social and practical world they live in every day. What you might call their learning ecosystem. So Ingerstrom's framework called activity system to help us map out these systems. Honestly, you can think of it as a powerful lens that lets us see all the different moving parts that influence whether the learning from a course actually sticks and makes a difference in the real world. So at the center, you've got the learner, the goal, and the tools they use. Simple enough, but this is the crucial part. You also have to look at the community there in the rules, both official and unofficial, that shape their work, and specific responsibilities they have. All of these things weave together to form an activity system. So imagine a teacher taking our course. There's the subject, their goal. The object is to learn new ways to teach sustainability using digital tools, but you can't ignore all the other stuff. Their school, the community, it has its own expectation. The rules like strict curriculum requirements might box them in. It's all connected. You can't change one piece without affecting the other. So now we can actually see the system, but this is where activity theory gets really interesting. It doesn't just give us a static picture of a system. It actually explains how that system can change over time. Transformation, it turns out, often kicks off with Ingerstrom calls a contradiction. And really, that's just a tension or a clash between different parts of a system. For example, our teachers learn these amazing new hands-on methods in the course, but their school system demands old school top-down lectures that tension, and that is a tension. That's not a sign of failure. It's the very engine that drives innovation and change. So when we start applying these ideas to our course development, we can completely reimagine our digital courses. They stop being these static repositories of information and instead becomes dynamic learning laboratories. They become spaces where people can reflect on the real contradiction in their daily work, share those experiences and actually experiment with new practices together. And this is just so vital for complex areas like sustainability. Its challenges are often called wicked problems because they are messy, they're interconnected, and so they have not an easy answer. So to tackle these, we can't just learn a few new facts. We need to challenge our assumptions, maybe even break a few rules. Some scholars call this transgressive learning, and a digital learning lab is the perfect place to make it happen. So here is how these two frameworks fit together beautifully. Theory of change gives us our destination. It makes us get crystal clear the outcomes we're aiming for. An activity theory system gives us the map. It helps us understand the terrain and the messy real world process of how change actually happens within a system. And this all leads us to the completely new set of design questions. We're no longer just asking what content do we need to cover. Now we're asking things like what activity systems are learners actually in? What are the real contradictions they're dealing with? And how can our course become a space for them to do some collaborative reflection and real experimentation? Ultimately, this is the goal, isn't it? To design learning experiences that are deeply connected to the day-to-day realities of our learners, while also giving them the tools and the space to drive meaningful, lasting transformation. So I want to leave you with a few things to think about as you design your new course. Start by asking this: what is a specific real world change it's really trying to support? Secondly, really put yourself in your students' shoes and think about their activity system. What are the tensions? What are the contradictions between what they're learning in your course and the rules, the tools, and the community? And finally, the big one: how can you transform your course from a simple content repository into a real learning laboratory? How can you design a space